Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to dial in. Welcome back to the show, everybody. It is a beautiful sunny day outside in Chicago. It's actually been the first time it's been warm in the last week or so because it was frigid the last 2 days with snow. But right now it's 50 degrees, which means we're gonna get some beautiful football. We're gonna get some outstanding good vibes, and we're gonna have a really fun time. It's your host Colin O'Callahan, and thanks for turning in. Let's jump right into the show. Let's put up the screen. Let's put up the predictions, and let's see what we've got. First up tomorrow night, we got the New England Patriots versus the New Jersey Jets. Yes, I said New Jersey because that is where they play and that is where they belong. Sorry, Jonah, you know that's the truth. So the Patriots are going to be debuting their rivalry jerseys tomorrow night at 8:15. If you haven't seen them, they look absolutely fantastic. I'll pull them up in like a few minutes or so if I can find it. But yeah, the Patriots are coming off their seventh straight win, this time on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it wasn't the best game on both sides of the ball. Like, they got off to a horrible start defensively, as usual. You know, it took a while for the offense to really get in a groove. But what really allowed the Patriots to, keep up and take the lead and pull away was that they had three explosive plays, really four explosive plays that really decided the whole momentum of the game. The first was to end the first quarter. It was the 72-yard touchdown to Kyle Williams. Then at the end of the second quarter, on fourth and goal at the 1, Drake May found Stephon Diggs in the corner of the end zone to put the Patriots up by 4. Then on the second play of the second half, TreVeyon Henderson broke loose for a 55-yard touchdown run. That put New England ahead 21-10. And on a drive where they had a chance to run out the clock, TreVeyon Henderson once again bounced off and tackled to the left side, and one thing led to another. Found a huge gap off the left side, and a 69-yard touchdown run put the game out of reach. And while there was an interception, the drive before that kind of put the Patriots fans, on their heels a little bit. The defense got the stop that they needed, and really, New England just made a few more plays in the end. Tampa Bay just couldn't close on their chances, and that's why the Patriots are still 8-2 and one of the best teams in the AFC. The Jets, they're coming off their second win in a row, so the Patriots cannot underestimate their competition whatsoever. However, I'm sure as hell that Justin Fields is not the one person that the Patriots defense is worried about. Because if I pull up my notes right here, the man went 3 for 6 for 5 yards in the first half. 5. He finished 6 of 11 for 54 yards with one touchdown pass and an interception. And the one touchdown was a 41-yard screen to Breece Hall. So if you take that play away, that's 5 of 10 for 12 yards. And the worst part about it, that screen was the only touchdown that the Jets offense scored. It was somehow tied at 17 because New York special teams really came in the clutch. Kene Nwanu had a 99-yard kickoff return touchdown that tied the game at 7. And then right after the Browns went 3-and-out on the next possession, Isaiah Williams, he goes 77 yards to the house on a punt return. That put New York ahead by 14. And while the Cleveland Browns, looked decent in the first half offensively, they just couldn't do anything after halftime. They picked up only 9 more first downs, 3 for 7 on third down, 6 penalties, and 122 total yards of offense. Dylan Gabriel only had 42 yards in that span. So that was pretty much the biggest difference in the game. We knew both defenses played outstanding. Will McDonald, he had 4 sacks, just a week after, Quinton Williams and Sauce Gardner got traded. So that was a huge breakout performance for him. I wouldn't really say breakout, but it was kind of, that huge game that he really needed to have to, get that Jets, in a somewhat steady position. New York had 6 sacks overall. Their defense only gave up 3 points after halftime. And, I mean, listen, the offense wasn't spectacular, but besides that screenplay, they did force the Browns to jump off sides on 4th and 1. So, I mean, they did at least the bare minimum there. Having said that, this is probably not going to be a close game. I'm not saying that this is going to be an easy blowout because I think the Jets can definitely be scrappy. Listen, the New England Patriots defense, they're going to start off slow. Okay, because we've seen this movie time and time again. It happened against the Saints, the Titans, the Raiders, the Steelers. Last week against Tampa Bay, that they're not going to get off to the best start. But eventually, against teams like the Jets and against teams like the Titans and the Saints, they figure it out. They tighten up their coverages. They regain their composure, and they find a way to, make sure that the opponent doesn't have a chance of winning. So To make a long story short, I'm going to pick the New England Patriots to win this game 31-14. Now we're going to move on to Sunday morning's festivities in Madrid between the Miami Dolphins and the Washington Commanders. Ay. This is not going to be that fun of a game. I mean, Washington and Miami, they're both 3-7. They've had really underwhelming seasons. And it's crazy to think that the Dolphins are the ones that, have the momentum entering this game. They pulled off their most impressive victory they've had in the 4 years that Mike McDaniel has been the head coach. And I am not exaggerating because they actually beat a legitimate foe at home against a really, really strong Buffalo Bills team. 30-13. They smacked the Bills around. And there were chances where the Bills had a chance to get right back into the game, but they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. Like, they made way too many mistakes. They had 3 turnovers. They had backbreaking penalties. It took until the fourth quarter for the Bills offense to even score a point. In the red zone, they were absolutely egregious. They were atrocious. And Miami, on the other hand, just trying to play complementary football and overcoming 2 interceptions from Tua Tagovailoa actually made more than enough explosive plays to put that game out of reach. They were up 13-0 thanks to 2 sweet touchdown passes thrown by Tua. And in the second half, when the Bills, tried to get back into the game, De'Von Achane, he put the game way out of hand with a couple of long touchdown runs. And that's really all it took for Miami to pull off a huge upset. So a lot of credit goes to them. I know that this is more of a bad sign for the Buffalo Bills than anything else, but the Dolphins deserve their fair share of credit, and they deserve their flowers for, an incredible victory that they desperately needed. Washington, on the other hand, experienced the exact opposite because we all knew that they were going to get blown out by a Lions team desperate to bounce back after getting in their own way against Minnesota. The Commanders didn't have their starting quarterback, their best wide receiver, 2 of their top edge rushers, and their starting cornerback. I mean, we kind of knew that the Lions were, not going to make this a fair fight. And sure enough, excluding the final nail-down drive, the Lions scored on every single possession, every drive. Jared Goff had 320 yards with 3 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had a hat-trick performance of his own. Jameson Williams, he had well over 100 yards. And Washington's offense was just so sad to watch. I mean, I don't like using injuries as an excuse as to why, teams lose or why a season doesn't go well for them, but it's hard not to do that in Washington's case. When your best receiver for the day was Treylon Burks, that's just a sad sight to see. And I like Treylon Burks. I'm not trying to, cast any aspersions on him, but it's just considering the fact that the Commanders were in the NFC Championship last year with one of the hottest offenses in the league and an opportunistic defense. Offensively, unless they are perfect every drive, they can't really do much of anything. And defensively, their secondary is just an absolute wreck. I think they give up the second most. Let me pull this up. I think they give up the second most passing yards in the National Football League. Yeah, right there. 260 passing yards a game, only 9 yards fewer than the Pittsburgh Steelers at 270, who, didn't have that great of a game against Justin Herbert. But I digress. When I look at this game, I think it'll be a pretty close game because, both teams are struggling. Yet, I don't really see this as a high-scoring affair. My gut is, because Dan Quinn is going to assume defensive play calling duties, that this defense is going to, take a little bit of a different look. The play calling is going to be different. The scheme is going to be mixed up once in a while. And I think in the Miami Dolphins case, you saw the potential that they had last week and a couple weeks prior against the Atlanta Falcons. When they are at their best, they could beat anybody. They could beat just about anybody. I mean, we saw on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills, when they can shut down the run, there are not a lot of teams that, can rely on their passing game to, get out of harm's way. And I think when you're the Washington Commanders, you don't have Terry McLaurin. Zach Ertz is 34 years old. You pretty much are running out of wide receivers because Deebo Samuel, he's just incredibly banged up, and he is just losing his burst by the week. And with the running game, I mean, it shows flashes, but it doesn't really do anything in the long run if you can't throw the ball. So I'm going to pick the Dolphins to win in a pretty low-scoring game, 20-17, and that's just because I think De'Von Achane is going to be the biggest X factor for Miami's offense. So, okay, now we're gonna move into Sunday's festivities here. Let's see what game we have to start the 1 o'clock slate. We got I actually skipped a page. The Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers. So we're gonna go into this section right here. Um, Atlanta lost a pretty dicey grudge match against the Indianapolis Colts in Berlin. It was pretty much the way I thought it would. You know, both teams were going to be incredibly talented. They were going to be scrappy. You knew that whoever had the ball last was going to win. But in Atlanta's case, the biggest reason why they lost, they could not take advantage of any of the opportunities that they were given. That defense, yeah, gave up 280 yards and 3 touchdowns to Jonathan Taylor. Like, their run defense got gashed, but they still made enough plays to let the offense, close the deal and win the game. They sacked Daniel Jones 7 times. They forced 2 turnovers. They forced 2 fourth down stops. Normally, against any other team, that should be an easy loss. But in Atlanta's case, they literally could not score a single point off of any of the chances that they were given. Like I said, 7 sacks, 2 turnovers, 2 fourth down stops. How do you not win that game? You're up 17-14, midway through the fourth quarter, and then sure enough, Jonathan Taylor, the hero of the game, cuts it loose for an 83-yard score. Atlanta actually responded with a, solid drive of their own to take the 3-point lead, but Indianapolis ended up tying the game. Michael Penix Jr., for the second week in a row, committed an intentional grounding penalty that forced the game into overtime. And when he did get the ball, they did next to nothing. They picked up 1 first down because of a penalty, and they punted a few plays later. So Michael Penix has not been playing well. He only has 9 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. Sunday afternoon, he went 12 of 28. And in the second half, I'm going to pull this up because I don't want to botch my stats. He went 5 of 18. 5 of 18. They score the 5th fewest points in the National Football League. When you have Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney and a solid offensive line, they've only allowed 13 sacks this year. It's unacceptable. And I know people want to scapegoat the coaches that, Raheem Morris is not, evolving as a head coach, or he didn't really learn from his past experience with Tampa Bay, or, Zach Robinson, he's not really made out to be a play caller unless he has Sean McVay. I don't think making a coaching change is going to be the biggest difference, nor do I think that, benching Penix for Kirk Cousins or whatever the case, if they decide to, bench a wide receiver or elevate someone from the practice squad, I don't even think that's going to make a difference. You need to rely on your stars to come through and show out. And Atlanta has not done that so far. They've lost 4 in a row now. And the worst part, the cherry on top, they don't even have a first-round pick next year. That's going to the Los Angeles Rams. That's so good. The Carolina Panthers, on the other hand, they are not in a better situation because they surprisingly got stymied on their home field by the New Orleans Saints. Carolina actually got up to a pretty solid start offensively. They went right down the field on their opening drive. Rico Dowdle scored another touchdown. They went ahead 7-0. But afterwards, they did nothing besides punt and turn the ball over. Bryce Young only threw for 124 yards. Rico Dowdle, he got slowed down. And the defense let Tyler Shough look like Drew Brees. He had well over 280 yards, a couple touchdown passes. There were a lot of explosive plays. There were a couple of wide open shots to Juwan Johnson early in the first half. Early in the first half, there was the 60-plus yard touchdown to Chris Olave that really gave the New Orleans Saints the spark they needed. Alvin Kamara had well over 100 yards from scrimmage. And meanwhile, the Panthers got exposed. And I've been warning about this over the last couple of weeks. If you shut down Rico Dowdle, the Panthers offense is not going to, perform well or not, perform at the level that you'd want them to be at. And Bryce Young, I hate to say it, he has not improved. And there are definitely flashes where he shows you like, oh, wow, the Panthers might want to keep him around. And then there are other times where it's like, this guy was a number 1 overall pick. So Carolina is now 5-5. They have reverted back to mediocrity. And the Atlanta Falcons, I should say, are 3-6 after being 3-2 earlier in the year. Both teams are in desperate need of a bounce-back win. If Atlanta loses, their season is pretty much over because I don't know how you can make the playoffs after a 3-7 start. I know there are teams that have been able to do it after starting 4-8, but when you're in this stacked of a conference and Tampa Bay is the team in the division that you have to go up against, the odds are not looking good. And for Carolina, you need your quarterback to play well. And it doesn't matter how many yards Rico Dowdle has or, whether the defense is able to force a crucial takeaway here and there. They need better play from their quarterback, and, they haven't gotten that lately. So I think Carolina, they won the first matchup in Bank of America Stadium 30-0. I don't think we're going to get the same matchup this time around. I think, we're going to get a little bit of a closer contest. I know the Atlanta Falcons are going to score at least a few more points than they did the last time. But I think given the fact that the Falcons are at home and you need a win, you need something to, keep your season afloat. I feel like they're going to have the momentum on their side. And I think, as long as their defense, continues to amplify enough pressure, then they'll be in good shape. So my final score, I have the Falcons winning 27-20. Next up, we have the Bills and the Buccaneers. Both are coming off unfortunate losses. Buffalo is heading back home. And Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even though this loss against the Patriots didn't completely jeopardize their, playoff seeding, I still think, they're probably going to be one and done in the playoffs because we've seen them have, a couple of impressive victories this year. They beat the Seattle Seahawks. They were able to beat, if I'm not mistaken, they beat Atlanta. They beat Houston. They beat the Jets. They lost to Philly. They were able to beat San Francisco. They beat Seattle. Right? Actually, why am I even counting in my head? I could just pull it up here. Yeah, okay. So, and they beat New Orleans as well. So, this was probably their most impressive victory of the season. Given the circumstances, high-scoring thriller. Both quarterbacks were absolutely sensational, and Baker Mayfield just made a few more plays than Sam Darnold did in the end. So, kudos to him. But the point is, you just know that against, the elite teams, Philadelphia and Detroit, if you run into one of those two, you're probably going to be sent home. And in the Buffalo Bills case, you might not even win your division. And you might not even be the 5th seed in your own conference because they got absolutely punked by the Miami Dolphins. Their run defense is absolutely abysmal. They give up the 3rd most rushing yards in the National Football League. They let Devon Achane have an outstanding performance when you knew that he was going to be the main focal point of the offense. The offense turned the ball over 3 times. Josh Allen was responsible for 2 of them. James Cook couldn't really do much on the ground. And yeah, you can say, well, Josh Allen had well over 300 yards, but empty calorie stats. It took until the 4th quarter for you to score. So I think that in this particular case, when I look at, both teams here, I think the Bills are going to bounce back. I think they're at home. They do a little bit better against, some of the stronger teams in the National Football League. We saw that a couple of weeks ago against the Kansas City Chiefs. And in Tampa Bay's case, you really need this to be your best game. And you need to be perfect in all 3 phases for you to even have a chance of winning. Because if you make one little slip up, that's going to be the biggest difference between you winning and you losing. The biggest difference between you potentially reaching the NFC Championship and then getting sent home in the first round. So I'm saying that the Buffalo Bills, they're going to win this game 30-22. All right, Texans-Titans. I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Actually, I will because the Houston Texans are coming off an outstanding victory. Tennessee's coming off a bye. The Texans in the 4th quarter were down 29-10. Their offense could do next to nothing. Their defense, while they couldn't deserve too much blame because they were keeping Trevor Lawrence in check, they let up, a couple big touchdown drives. Parker Washington, he had a huge punt return score that put the Jaguars ahead 17-0. Nobody at all thought that there was any chance of a comeback happening whatsoever. And don't lie and say, oh, yeah, no, I did. Nobody could have seen this coming. All of a sudden, the 4th quarter starts, and Davis Mills goes absolutely berserk. He threw for over 120 yards and scored 3 touchdowns in the 4th quarter alone, which included the go-ahead score with 30 seconds left on an 18-yard scramble. That was just flat-out phenomenal. It was one of the best 4th quarter comebacks I've seen in a good bit. And, the Texans offense finally looked like the unit that we saw a couple of years ago when CJ Stroud was a rookie. They ran the ball efficiently. They were, spreading the ball around. The offensive line was held up, and, they were pretty much fortified. They didn't allow a single pressure, I think. And the Jaguars offense, on the other hand, just could do nothing. And more importantly, they let the Texans get back into the game with a few incompletions that stopped the clock. They only ran 9 plays, picked up 1 net yard, and when they had one last desperate chance to, make something happen, Will Anderson came through with a clutch strip sack, and Sheldon Rankins took the scoop and score all the way to the house. That unfortunately made a few bettors unhappy as they ended up winning 36-29 instead of 30-29. So Danielle Hunter had 3.5 sacks. Houston had 5 overall as a defense. And like I said, in the fourth quarter, they just turned it up a whole nother notch. I don't know what was being said on that sideline. I don't know what adjustments were being made. I don't even think there was a momentum swinging play that, flipped the script here. It was just the Texans, they did not give up, and the Jaguars, they played way too conservative. So, having said that, I'm going to pick the Texans to win again. Now, I'm not sure that CJ Stroud is going to be back. I saw the reports. It looked like Davis Mills was going to suit up again for this week because, concussions, they are definitely something that you don't want to rush any player back from too quickly, let alone a quarterback. And I think that if you're DeMeco Ryans, you know that you're starting to build something. You're starting to scratch the surface a little bit. You know you got the best defense in the National Football League. And offensively, as long as you, do the bare minimum and show a pulse and not get in your own way, then I think they'll be okay. So my final score is very simple. I think they're going to win 27-3. The Titans are just a horrible football team. They're the worst in the National Football League, and I don't even think it's close. Next up, we got the Bears versus the Vikings. Once again, the Chicago Bears barely came through with the win. 24-20 against the Giants. They were down 10 in the fourth quarter. And unfortunately, in the Giants situation, the biggest turning point play of that game was late in the third quarter when Jackson Dart suffered a concussion, coughed the ball up as he was going to the ground. The Bears were covered. And as soon as Russell Wilson took the field for the rest of the fourth quarter, I just knew the Bears were going to win this game because New York's offense, when it had Russell Wilson under center, showed next to no life whatsoever, except for week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys, but any quarterback could do well against that defense. And when you're going up against one of the worst defenses in the National Football League, who give up a lot of big plays, who don't, who cannot hold on to a fourth quarter lead, this is the third fourth quarter lead that they've actually blown this entire season. You just knew that for an opportunistic team like the Bears, you just knew somehow, some way, their offense was going to find a way to get it done. And to Caleb Williams' credit, he did so. And it was his running ability that gave the Bears the lead in the final minutes of the fourth quarter. I think, honestly, the Chicago Bears should have won by a lot more if it weren't for a couple of questionable fourth down decisions. But, the Giants had a handful of them as well. So I think it was a pretty fair fight. The Giants had their chances, but once again, they completely blew it. And they fired their head coach as a result. But I'm going to get into that in just a second. The Minnesota Vikings, they had a chance to, pull off a home upset against the Baltimore Ravens. They were up 10-3 early on in the first half. And their offense went right down the field to score a touchdown on the opening drive. And really, the defense didn't give up a touchdown until midway through the second half. So Minnesota was doing whatever they could to, win that football game. But the offense turned it over twice. The special teams fumbled on the kickoff. That allowed Baltimore to score their first touchdown of the game. And they committed 13 penalties. 7 of them were false starts. So Minnesota did the exact opposite of what they did last week against the Detroit Lions. They just completely got in the wrong way. They made too many mistakes. And while they did have a chance to set it into overtime, the Ravens defense was able to get that one stop they needed. And, I think the Vikings, they just put themselves in too big of a hole for them to even have a chance of, keeping that game alive. So I would say in the second meeting between these two, I think the Bears are going to split this series. We saw through the first 3 quarters in week 1 that the Bears could beat the Minnesota Vikings at the run game. The problem was they couldn't hold on for the last 15 minutes as J.J. McCarthy, showed up in the clutch, led 3 straight touchdown drives to win the game. And, we all thought, here we go again for the Chicago Bears. But since then, they've really steadied themselves. They've headed into a way better direction, and now they're looking like a scrappy wildcard team. But having said all of that, they are probably the biggest frauds in the entire NFC postseason race because let me pull up their schedule real quick, okay, and just look at their wins. So they had a convincing win against the Dallas Cowboys. All right, considering that they started 0-2, that was impressive. But it took a blocked field goal to beat the Raiders. It took a few fumbles to beat Washington. They kind of muddled it out against the New Orleans Saints. Then they lost to Baltimore. It took a horrible missed tackle to beat Cincinnati. And in the fourth quarter, they barely beat the Giants by 4. And if I look at the rest of their schedule, you got Minnesota. Then you got Pittsburgh, Philly, the Packers twice, Cleveland, San Fran, and Detroit. Like, if they barely get a win against the Minnesota Vikings, the time is probably going to come where they're going to, suffer a late season slump. And worst case scenario is that they make the playoffs entirely. But my guess is they're probably going to back in as a wild card contender, and they're going to get sent home in the first round. So I think the Bears will win this game for now, but I do not have any confidence in their postseason hopes whatsoever. Let's say they win 24-23. I think that's apropos for both sides here. Okay, Packers-Giants. Speaking of the Giants, 24 hours after they lost to the Chicago Bears, John Mara made the decision to fire head coach Brian Daboll. And unfortunately, I think everybody saw this one coming. It's not just about how bad they've been this season or the year before or even the year before that. His first year, he was the coach of the year. At one point, they were 7-2. They kind of, slumped a bit to end the regular season, but they won their first playoff game since 2012, which was the year they won the Super Bowl. Daboll won Coach of the Year. Saquon Barkley had 1,900 rush yards. Daniel Jones had a pretty decent season at quarterback, and it looked like the future was bright. Then that offseason happened. They didn't pay Saquon Barkley. They gave $40 million a year for 4 years to Daniel Jones, and everything just fell off the rails instantaneously. Now, we see Daniel Jones blossoming in Indianapolis, Saquon Barkley a Super Bowl champion in Philadelphia, and the Giants, on the other hand, are in a disastrous situation once again. Unfortunately, I think this was the right decision. You just knew that, something had to change, especially after the last couple of seasons. The offense was just spinning in circles. They have completely, the losses have just multiplied year after year after year. And I know you can't blame coaches when players make mistakes, but when you see this happening time and time again, these aren't flukes. It's a trend, and it starts from the top. And it's a result of how your culture and your foundation is built upon. So I don't have a problem with the Giants making this move. My only issue is, why the heck did Joe Schoen not go as well? Because he was the one that assembled this roster. And when I saw the report that he was going to be the guy to lead the search for a new head coach, my initial reaction was simple. Why? Because he was the one that let Saquon Barkley walk. He was the one that overpaid Daniel Jones. He was the one that insisted that, they had to build the team around the quarterback rather than address the biggest flaws on that football team. And as a result, they've had, 5 wins now in the last 2 seasons? It's embarrassing, especially when you're playing for New York. So the Green Bay Packers, on the other hand, I'm not going to give them this much of a pass either, because last week, or at least last 2 weeks, at home nonetheless, their offense has been pathetic. 2 touchdowns scored in 8 quarters, really, against the Panthers and the Eagles. Philadelphia, I can understand. They have an outstanding defense. They, won the Super Bowl, and, they've won the last 3 matchups. It's pretty obvious that the Eagles are, far and away a better team than the Green Bay Packers. But Green Bay just looks frustrated right now. They look lost because they have a good amount of pieces. Like, you got Josh Jacobs and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Obviously, you don't have Tucker Kraft for the rest of the year because of a torn ACL, but Jordan Love is supposed to be one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League, and Matt LaFleur is a pretty damn good coach. Their defense is still a top 5 unit. Yet, it just looks like they haven't progressed or they haven't evolved. They went from being a Super Bowl contender after week 2 to now, look at it right now. they're going to be a 7th seed again for the 3rd straight year. I saw a press conference earlier, yesterday. A reporter asked Matt LaFleur, "Do you think that you're coaching for your job?" And Matt LaFleur gave a professional answer. He said, "I think you're coaching for your job every single day that you step into this building." But I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was somewhere around the block. But the point is, clearly you should be a way better team than you are right now. After you beat the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago, you were supposed to be, a team to, be a huge threat to Detroit winning the division. And instead, you're once again looking like the second fiddle. And that's saying a lot considering you beat them week 1. So for this particular matchup, you got the Green Bay Packers going up against Mike Kafka, the interim head coach, and Jameis Winston will be starting for the Giants because Jackson Dart, he got tested for his 4th concussion of the season. This one is going to keep him out this week. And I think it's the right decision because, Jackson Dart's style of play, it's really scaring me. And you can question the play calling or the offensive line or the protections that they have in place. You can do that. But when you have an extremely athletic quarterback that is not afraid to take punishment and that is doesn't slide a whole lot, it's really, what's the right word to say? You don't want to see the next face of your franchise suffer an injury that's going to keep him out long term. And you want to see him, continue to not just only have a successful career, you want him to live a normal life. So I agree that Jameis Winston should be the starter. Russell Wilson at this point, he's just cooked. He is absolutely washed up. You just know that if he's out on the field, you're going to lose by 20 to 25 points. Jameis Winston, he has flaws with the turnovers and, his style of play, but he brings vibes, he brings leadership, and you know that, when he plays at his best, players can run through a wall for him. So I think that this is going to be a particularly close game. I'm going to pick the Packers for now, but I am not going to be surprised if we see an upset here. Give me Green Bay, though, 30 to 27. All right, Steelers-Bengals. We got the second meeting between these two teams. Since he's coming off a bye, but the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got shellacked by the LA Chargers. And it wasn't even that impressive of a game from Justin Herbert. Like, he got sacked 5 times. They didn't do the best on 3rd down. It took until an interception late in the second half with 18 seconds left. Not in the second half, the first half, for the Chargers to score a touchdown. It was just not overall a perfect performance from the Chargers offense, but they were efficient. They didn't turn the ball over. Justin Herbert was still able to throw for 220 yards. Kamani Vidal had 95 yards on the ground. Ladd McConkey was the best receiver of the game. Really, my point of view, that defense really set the tone from start to finish, and they really lifted LA to a complete victory. They didn't give up a touchdown until garbage time, and before that point, Aaron Rodgers only threw for 96 yards with 0 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions. That Steelers offense looked absolutely confused. It looked dazed. Jaylen Warren is probably the only consistent player that they have on that unit, and that honestly should not be the case because when you trade for DK Metcalf and you have a reliable security blanket and Pat Freiermuth and you have younger guys on the rise like Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, you should be a little bit better, especially when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. But having said that, Joe Burrow has returned to practice. I don't know if he's going to start in this game. I don't know what the exact report is. My guess is they're probably going to wait an extra week or so and continue to start Joe Flacco. But I think the Steelers even this series up. It's in Pittsburgh. They're not on Thursday night this time. And really, I think the defense over the last couple of weeks, they haven't been particularly dominant. They forced 6 turnovers against the Indianapolis Colts, and they were able to sack Justin Herbert 5 times the week before. But I think when they have the crowd on their side and they get to play to their strengths in their house under their terms, there are not too many teams that can beat them. And so I think the Steelers are going to be able to win a pretty scrappy fight, 20-16. So. All right, next up, the final game of the 1 o'clock slate. We got the Chargers and the Jags. So I'm going to pick the Chargers to win this one. I have not been impressed at all with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's putting it nicely because since that Monday night victory against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Jaguars completely maxed out. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 games. They have no, consistency offensively. They just placed Travis Hunter on season-ending IR due to a knee injury. Brian Thomas Jr., he's incredibly banged up, so the only reliable receivers you have are Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, and Austin Trammell. The defense has really taken a few steps back. They're reverting back to, the dumpster fire and the hamster wheel that they were the last 2 seasons. And unfortunately for this team, they're kind of looking like the squad that I thought that they would be at the beginning of the year, where, they would struggle on both sides of the ball, and it would take, perfect performances for them to, find a way to win the football game. So if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if this is the first time that these two are meeting since the playoff debacle. Actually, I could be wrong. I don't think that is. But the point is, that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert are going to be the 2 guys in the biggest spotlight. But I like the Chargers better in this one. I think their defense is a lot better. I trust the quarterback more. Their running game has been, more productive in these last few weeks. And the best part about it is they have more guys in their passing game that can open up the rest of the offense. You got Quentin Johnston, obviously Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, Oronde Gadsden, if he's healthy, if he's able to return. You got him and I can't talk. You got him into the mix. So I think the Chargers could win a pretty convincing game here, 31-17. Now we get into the 405/425 window. Seahawks-Rams. That to me is going to be the game of the week. I don't know why they didn't put Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady onto this one. This is going to be a huge challenge for both teams here. Seattle's coming off a 44-22 victory over the Arizona Cardinals. Their defense forced 2 scoop-and scores. They ran for 198 yards on 46 attempts. Sam Darnold only threw 2 incompletions, despite the 2 turnovers he had late in the second half. And really, it was just an overall clinic against the Arizona Cardinals. Just a week after that team was able to beat the Dallas Cowboys in their house on Monday Night Football. The Rams, they're coming off an outstanding victory over the San Francisco 49ers as well. Matthew Stafford threw 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kyren Williams had a solid day. The defense, they forced a couple big stops early in that first half that, gave the Rams all the momentum that they needed. And despite the 49ers, making it a 1-score game, to start the third quarter and, the drive after that, the Rams just could not be stopped. And, they had more firepower. They were well coached. They were more physically prepared. And they just proved to be the vastly superior football team. So having said all of this, what's really forcing me to pick the Rams in this case, not just the fact that they're at home. It's that Sam Darnold, in his last 2 games against the Rams, got absolutely shell-shocked. The last time he played them was in the wild card round last year when he was with the Minnesota Vikings. He got sacked 9 times. He only scored 9 points. And it really, really hurt his stock entering free agency. I mean, there's a reason why, the terms that Seattle gave him were not as fortuitous as many hoped it would be. So this is a huge prove-it game for Sam Darnold. It is a huge test for the Seattle Seahawks. But more importantly, the Rams cannot underestimate their competition here because the Seattle Seahawks have not lost a game on the road in the last 10 matchups. And when you have an explosive defense and a highly incredible offense with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet and Cooper Kupp, and an offensive line that has been absolutely phenomenal, you cannot play it over your head, and you cannot make a mistake that's going to let them back into this ball game. So I think the Rams are going to find a way to hold on to this one. I think it comes down to the quarterback play. Matthew Stafford is having the best season of his career, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think he leads them to glory 30-20. Now we get the next NFC West matchup. We have the 49ers and the Cardinals. So pretty much previewed how both of those 2 teams did earlier on. So I'm just going to get straight into it. I think the 49ers pull up the sweep. You know what's funny? I didn't notice this until I saw it on Twitter. Since week 3, they have literally went back and forth trading outcomes. Loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. So if they lost to the Rams last week, my guess is they're probably going to beat Arizona this time. Jacoby Brissett, he has been okay. He's been playing really well, since being the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. Last week, not so much. Got sacked 5 times. 2 of them led to scoop and scores. And realistically, they should have lost 44-7, but 2 of those touchdowns that they scored were literally gimmies after, Sam Darnold coughed it up near his own end zone. One on an interception and the other on a strip sack. So I'm not even going to take too much stock into that one. I'm saying that the 49ers, they're going to find a way to, not make this too much of a fair fight. I want this to be a close game, but my guess is that the 49ers, they're going to just find a way to, take their anger out on an inferior opponent. And I say my final score is going to be, let's see what I got here, 28-17. Yeah, that sounds about right. All right, next up we have the Ravens and the Browns. The Ravens coming off a win, Browns coming off a loss. Ravens have won 3 in a row, while the Browns are 2-7. Yeah, I'm just not going to waste any more time. Baltimore wins this one, 31-7. Sorry, Ryan. I love you, dude. Final game of the Sunday afternoon window, we have the Chiefs and the Broncos. So Kansas City is coming off a bye, whereas the Broncos are coming off probably their ugliest win of the year since the Jets game in London. Hold on one second. Just wanted to turn the lights on because I know it's getting dark. The Denver Broncos won their 7th game in a row. Kudos to them. Their defense is one of the best in football, but their offense is so inconsistent. Bo Nix threw for 150 yards with 2 interceptions. That was probably one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life, okay? Because both teams could only score 1 touchdown. They combined for 22 penalties. There were way too many punts. And Denver, to their credit, they just, their defense was phenomenal. They sacked Geno Smith 6 times. He got beat up in that game badly. They were able to slow down the run. And really, it just came down to which team could control the trenches. And to Denver's credit, they kind of did that a little bit better than the Raiders. So I want to pick the Broncos because they're at home and they have a phenomenal defense. And, in their last 2 home matchups against Kansas City, they completely shut down this offense from start to finish. But I have to pick Patrick Mahomes in this one because their offense is more complete. You know that, you can count on Patrick Mahomes a lot more than you can trust on Bo Nix to get the job done. And Denver has an outstanding defense, but the Kansas City Chiefs are not too far off. So I think it just comes down to, like I said, which quarterback you can, count on in the final minutes. And I think that's going to be number 15 for the Chiefs. So final score here, Kansas City 26, Denver 16. Sunday Night Football, we have the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. I'm going to be honest, I had a very, very hard time picking the winner of this game because we saw the Lions in week 3 go into Baltimore on Monday Night Football and absolutely beat them up in all 3 phases. With the Philadelphia Eagles, their offense is troubled, to say the least. Their defense has gotten a lot better. Yet the Detroit Lions have a high-powered offense and a pretty consistent defense. So you really don't know what you're going to get from either side. It could really go either way. But I'm only picking the Eagles to win this game because they're at home. If this was in Detroit, I don't know. I might lean towards more Detroit in this case. But this was the NFC Championship that, we all thought we were going to get when the playoffs started last year. And instead, Washington just, was more explosive offensively. Their defense forced a lot of turnovers that swung the momentum of that game in a huge way. And, we ended up getting a 50-burger from the Philadelphia Eagles as a result the following week. So, like I said, I'm going to go with the Eagles here, but I am not picking this to be a blowout. I think they find a way to hang on 27-24. And then last but not least, we have the Cowboys and the Raiders. Monday Night Football. I want to say that the Cowboys can win this game by double digits because the Raiders are just, very bad this year. But Geno Smith a couple weeks ago against the Jacksonville Jaguars threw 4 touchdown passes. Brock Bowers was responsible for 3 of them, along with 12 catches for 129 yards. This is going to be a back and forth showdown. And on the road, the Cowboys, they're going to have to, find a way to show up in the clutch, or else Geno Smith is going to, have himself a night. But with that being said, I'm going to pick the Cowboys off of 2 weeks rest to win this game 30-17. I think that would be the perfect way to, close this week and end it in the right way. And with that, our games are officially predicted. And 2 teams on the bye, Colts and the Saints. Good for them. They kind of need a week off. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. And we'll be back with another episode. So, love you guys. Take care and enjoy.